So with this, I'll add another form to record down our transaction data. So now we're back in the form builder. I just need to change this section label accordingly. And for a transfer, it's only needing these very basic fields, the sender, the receiver, and the HR amount that we want to send. So I'm just going to drag in one select box here. Now for the select box, it will represent the sender. Now for the sender themselves, I can reference back to the form that we already have to retrieve all of the accounts that we generated. So the label, I'll just show the account ID as is. And the next field is the HR amount. And finally the receiver. And that's all we need so far. So I'll save the form. And also generate a CRUD component for our convenience. There we go. And come back to the App Studio. So I'll come in here and add a new process. And for this process here, I will name it as such. And for the variable ID in here, we will be able to view the transaction URL later on. So I'll just add a new transaction URL here in the first place. So in this case, now I'll rename the participant. And to make a HR transfer, it's as simple as pointing to a single tool and ending it accordingly. And after naming it as such, I can go to mapping, and this time we will make use of the Hedera send transaction tool. Now once again, it's going to ask us for all these details, so I'm going to fill them in accordingly. So for the transaction details, we can reference our transaction details form. Payment type is HR. For the payment configuration, we just need to map it to our fields. So for the sender's mnemonic phrase, we will have to reference it using hash variables. Once again, we can take advantage of the property assistant. So I'm going to use the form data hash variable in here to point back to the account data. And insert accordingly. But this time I'll also have to nest it accordingly to reference back to the sender's mnemonic phrase. So just like that, that should do the trick. So here we can also store the response to workflow variables. So we'll just save the process first. And now we can just come back and put this workflow variable here so that we can check out the transaction URL. Okay, so just like that, we just need to configure this start node in here to point back to our transaction details form that we just had, and apply the change, save the process, and now finally we can come back to the App Studio and edit our UI builder to expose the SendHR process. So we're back in our UI, drag in and run process component. Over here, we just need to reference it back. And we're done. So now we can save the UI and try it out. And so now we can launch the app. And over here, I can click on Transfer HR. So just for our own ease of reference, I'm going to generate another account to act as the receiver. So over here, we are going to transfer from this account to this particular account here. So I'm going to do a search. And for the HBAR amount, I can just simply key in any amount and click submit. So by doing this, the transfer will happen. So when we come back later to our transaction details, we can edit it and it has already occurred. So one of the ways that we can check it out is also to edit. Go to monitor and go to our archive processes. So in here, we can see that the transfer is complete and we have a transaction URL that we can reference. Okay, so just like that, we can see that the transfer has happened. Okay, so now very quickly, let's see how we can view our transactions on the Explorer and read our transaction data from there. So I'll drag in another text field and I'll name this as transaction ID. So when we perform any transactions, this transaction ID will show up in here. Now since transaction ID don't need to be modified, I can set it as a read-only field. And once we have this, we can just scroll down and find the Hedera Explorer link, drag it in, and we just need to configure accordingly once again. And that should be it for this form. So now we can save the form. So now there's just one step left to do in our process. So since we want to expose the transaction ID into our form, we can just add another flow variable in here. And first save the process. And now we can come back to our send transaction tool, scroll down until we find the transaction ID to store the response to here. And then finally we can come back, add just one more tool to expose that value into our form. So I can just edit this, I'll name it accordingly. And for the tool in here, we will now make use of the update form data tool. Select our transaction details form, and in here we just need to update our transaction ID. The value in here, once again, we can make use of the property assistant. And just like that, insert, apply, and save our process. Now once you have done that, we are ready to try it out once again. So I'm going to launch the app. And create just another transaction. Now once we have done this, we can come back, edit our record that we've previously done, and here we go, we can see our transaction ID in our form, and we can have a convenient button to verify our transaction on Hashgraph over here.